We did it. That was the craziest and most chaotic 2 months of my life, but even if I could go back, I wouldn't change a thing. This is the story of how we sold everything we owned in Alaska, bought a motorhome, and drove 2 kids, 2 cats, 2 dogs, and 2 adults over 6,000 miles looking for a new place to call home. Our journey began in a sleepy Alaskan town called Fairbanks, where my wife and I were born and raised. After 30 long years, we had finally had enough, so we said goodbye to our family and friends, then headed for the Canadian border on the biggest adventure of our lives. According to the Google machine, it was going to be 6 hours to the border and another hour into Canada to our first campsite. Except we left town about 6 hours late, and if Google tells you it'll take 6 hours in car time, we learned that you can expect to add another hour or 2 onto that to calculate RV time. We didn't even make it to the border. Well, we did our first day of driving, and that was tough. After sleeping on the side of the road for the night, we got back out there early to make up some time. And after about an hour or so, we made it to the Canadian border. Crossing the border into Canada was much easier than we thought it would be.
Good morning.
We wanted to be really organized, so we had a binder with every possible document we needed and our schedule for the next month. And that seemed to make things quicker for us, because as soon as I showed the border agent our document binder, he said,
Hold on to it. Cool.
Okay, you'll just park off onto the side.
Okay.
Okay, whisk this off this on the side.
All right. Sounds good. See you in a second.
okay, we made it past the Canadian border, no problems, got everything declared, and we're headed back on the road. On the road again, and the girls were very excited for our next stop, the world-famous Laird Hot Springs. We had a slight delay getting there. A friendly neighborhood buffalo herd blocked the road for a few minutes, but that was okay with us. As we kept driving, we saw over a dozen black bears, including this mama and her cub. They were all over the place. But we kept driving and eventually made it to our campsite at Laird Hot Springs. We were relieved to see they took security very seriously with tall electrified perimeter fences and all the best practices for bear-free camping, so we snuggled in for the night, feeling safe. After driving our first 1,000 miles in 5 days, it was a day of much-needed rest. The fam was so happy to just have a day of no driving, to relax and enjoy the hot springs. It's a long, scenic walk to the actual springs, down a boardwalk that goes over a marsh and way back into the woods. But when you finally make it there, the pools are terraced and cool off the farther from the hot side you go, which makes it perfect for kids. There were a few ancient-looking logs floating around that were super fun to play on for the girls. One of my favorite parts was this secret little outlet that led through the woods and back quite a ways. It did make me feel a bit like a salmon waiting to be plucked out by a bear, but other than that, it was a really fun experience. Back in the saddle, feeling refreshed, especially after a quick pit stop at a national treasure, old Timmy Hortons. The countryside in Canada reminded us of back home, with many of the same climates, creatures, and trees that we grew up with. It was a gorgeous and rugged place, but we moved through Canada as quick as possible so we could start scouting out new places to live. The main goal of our journey wasn't to see famous sites or big cities, although we did get to see a few, like the Redwoods, which I'll show you here in a second. What we actually wanted to see was as many little towns in as many different climates as possible. Try a town on for a day or two in a sense, and see what it would feel like to live there. That way, once we reached Las Vegas and we were staying with our parents for a while, we'd have a better idea of where we would like to live when we looked at property online. So we drove and drove and drove. After 8 wild days in Canada, we crossed the border back into the US in Washington. The US border crossing was a little more rigorous than the Canada one, but it went smoothly and we made it to our beautiful riverside campsite in good time. It was actually so beautiful that the people next to us decided to have a wedding there the next day, and they had their rehearsal as soon as we dropped our jacks. We got stuck inside for a while because they were walking down the aisle right outside our camper. It was hilarious, and hey, congrats to Jenny and Brendan. By day 12, we had driven 2,500 miles through Canada, Washington, northern Idaho, and made it into Montana, headed east. Our next stop was a quaint little town called Livingston, where we got to hang out by the Yellowstone River and see an old friend for a few days. We didn't get to spend a ton of time there, but enough to see that Montana is a gorgeous state with lots of farmland, and I can definitely see how it earned its nickname, Big Sky Country. On day 16, we arrived at a relative's home, an 80-acre alfalfa farm in Powell Butte, Oregon, for a few days of rest with no driving. The dogs really needed it too, because this was the first time they had a chance to get off leash in a few weeks. Many of the RV parks we stayed at were close quarters and required leashes at all times. But we explored the high desert farm, getting to hear all about the local history from a family that's lived there for the last 30 plus years.
Okay.
They had an outhouse and a wood stove that they, cooked on.
We also got to see a friend's property where they raise laying hens and goats. Up to this point, the trip had really felt like a much needed vacation, and we had forgotten how much we missed our animals. Seeing these folks farm was a good reminder of why we were on this journey. Back on the road again after a good break, we were feeling fired up to find our new property. While I drove, my wife reached out to realtors to schedule showings whenever we had service.
Yep, we'll be in town tomorrow.
We saw several properties, but the one that stood out to us the most was this one in Southern Oregon. It fit everything from our wish list: 10 quiet acres in the woods, good growing climate with 4 seasons, plenty of rainfall, our own seasonal creeks, and a huge barn. Tuck and I fell in love with this property almost immediately, but this was a huge decision that was years in the making. It was pretty scary to think that this might be the moment, so we decided we had to keep moving and sleep on it. It was about 10 p.m. when we drove the famously scenic Oregon coast, so this was all we could see, but we'll be back. The next day, we woke up in a redwood forest of Northern California. I've seen pictures all my life, but it was impossible to grasp the sheer scale of these massive trees until I saw them in person. After spending the morning hiking under the redwoods, it felt like we were on a different planet or on a movie set in a galaxy far, far away. This famous tree is called the Immortal Tree because it has survived a lightning strike, loggers, a flood, and a forest fire. Surprisingly, even with all of the trees, this was the first part of our trip where there was no burn ban, so we had a nice controlled campfire to close out the night. On day 24, roughly 4,000 miles into our journey, and after lots of debate, we submitted a formal offer on the Southern Oregon property. It felt pretty crazy, but we were able to submit an offer on a house in a different state from our phones. What a time to be alive. But then it was time to sit back and wait. To take our mind off things, we went out for a family bowling night at the Shasta Lanes in Redding, California. The family had a wonderful night blowing off some steam and loosening up a bit after almost a month on the road. Day 28 was a huge day of driving, taking us through Nevada and into Arizona to stay with family because we were out of vacation time and it was time to get back to work. Back on the Oregon property front, there was a little back and forth, but the seller had accepted our offer pending an inspection of the home, well, and a few other things. We were getting excited, getting our hopes up, but then the inspection report came back with some big safety issues that would need to be fixed before we could move in. So that meant more negotiations, more delays. While we waited to hear back from the seller, we tried to enjoy our time in the scorching heat of Lake Havasu, Arizona. Luckily, they were having a little cold front come through, which meant it was only 98 to 100 degrees during the day instead of the 115 degrees Fahrenheit that it had been. We had to live in and around the pool, so that whenever it got too hot, we just jumped right in. The dogs needed the AC even more than we did though. Tuck was not built for this weather, but eventually he did get comfortable protecting his fenced-in turf in the desert for a little while. It was so hot, they actually had people misters in the outdoor restaurants so you could enjoy yourself. What a place. After about a week, we left Arizona, headed towards the final planned stop on our North American tour, Las Vegas, Nevada. When you think of Las Vegas, you probably think of the Strip with casinos and craziness, but there are also normal neighborhoods in the surrounding areas, which is where our family lives and where we were going to be living until we found a new home. After we unpacked, Tuck finally got a good brushing, but about 5 minutes later, something spooked him and he accidentally fell in the pool like a total goofball. We spent the next half hour skimming the water to get as much of his hair out as we could. I never thought Tuck shed that much until he started living inside. It was a constant battle to keep from being buried in Tuck fur. Sometimes we would vacuum 3 times a day just to keep up. Watching Tuck live in a motorhome and in neighborhood houses for a while has shown us that having a Great Pyrenees as your standard family dog could be tough.
Sorry about that.
Don't get me wrong, he is wonderful with the little ones for the most part, but whenever Tuck hears something and can't see it, he needs to investigate. And then if he sees the thing that made the noise and it's new, he goes into full alarm. Anything can set him off, like when we put the trash cans out. He didn't like Charlie's new cowgirl hat for some reason. And I know he's smart because if you say any type of greeting, like, it sets him off because he thinks someone's there. He might not be the best city dog, but that's okay. I'm super proud of how he did on this trip, and he's perfect just the way he is. Day 45 started out like any other day, but then we got the call we had been waiting for.
It's like, let's just make this happen.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
you good with that?
Yeah, I think we're good with that.
Good
yeah.
with that, yep.
All right, cool, guys. Well, I will send this out, and congratulations for you're going to buy a house, and then we'll get forward on the rest of the stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Bank paperwork and house repairs meant that we had to wait about 2 more weeks before we could officially close on the Oregon property, but it was time to celebrate by heading to the Las Vegas Bull Riding Championships to watch our uncle's bull. I had never been to a rodeo before, but it felt like your huge arena sporting event, just with a little different flavor, I'd say. And these young men were incredible athletes. I mean, the courage to strap your hand to a 3,000-pound angry bull alone is mind-blowing to me. And these bulls showed no mercy and took no prisoners. This one was our uncle's bull. Ooh, he is a mean one. There were some injuries that made it hard to watch at times, to be honest, but we had an absolute blast with the family. Wonderful night. At long last, it was time for me to say goodbye to the girls and put in the final 800 miles to our new home in Oregon. For this part of the journey, I was flying solo so that I could supervise a few renovation projects and get the place ready for the girls. I did have all the animals, but it was just not the same without the rest of the fam. We did it. That was the craziest and most chaotic 2 months of my life, but to be standing here right now, after so long, just picturing this in my head, just feels surreal. It feels like we have a blank canvas to start our version of a farm, and I've already been jotting down some ideas. Super excited. If you want to know why we made this huge leap into the unknown, be sure to check out that video. Tuck and I better keep getting this place ready for the girls, so we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.